The street was quiet just moments before it happened. The late evening sun had painted the sky in soft orange, and people walked slowly, enjoying the cool air after a long day. Everything felt ordinary until the sound of screeching tires tore through the silence. In that sudden moment, life shifted. KeanuReeves, walking back from a small cafe with nothing but his thoughts for company, found himself struck by a speeding car that had lost control. The world spun, the ground rushed up, and then came the stillness of pain. As his body lay on the cold road, his breath shallow and broken, the crowd froze. Some gasped, some whispered, and others simply stood in shock. But not everyone stayed frozen. From the other side of the street, Sandra Bullock, who had just stepped out of a bookstore, saw everything unfold. Her heart pounded hard against her chest, and without a second thought she ran. Her feet hit the pavement with urgency, her mind clouded by fear but driven by a deep instinct to reach him first. She pushed past people who hesitated, her voice cutting through the noise, calling his name. The sound was raw, filled with desperation. When she finally reached him, she dropped to her knees on the rough asphalt. Her hands trembled as they hovered above him, afraid to touch, afraid of the pain he might feel, but unable to stay away. His face was pale, his eyes half open, fighting to stay in the moment. "Keanu? It's me!" she whispered, though her voice was shaking. "You're not alone." "I'm here!" The crowd began to gather closer, phones in hands, whispers filling the air. But for Sandra, none of that existed. All that mattered was the man before her. The man who had given so much kindness to the world. Now lying hurt and fragile on the unforgiving road, a stranger from the crowd offered his jacket to place beneath Keanu's head, and another person dialed emergency services. It was in that moment that kindness spread like a wave, breaking through fear. Sandra noticed it, but her focus never left him. She pressed his hand softly, as if her touch alone could remind him of strength, of resilience, of reasons to hold on. His lips moved, barely forming words. Sandra leaned closer, her ear near his mouth. His voice was faint, almost fading, but she caught it. "Don't let go." The words broke her completely. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away, refusing to let him see fear in her face. Instead, she nodded firmly. "I won't, I promise you." "Stay with me!" Sirens wailed in the distance, a sound of hope and dread together. Sandra's heart raced faster, every second stretching into an eternity. She looked at him and thought of all the times they had laughed together, of the moments when his quiet strength had carried her through her own storms. She remembered his humility, the way he always put others first. And now she felt it was her turn to fight for him. As the paramedics arrived, pushing through the circle of onlookers, Sandra's hands were still on his. They gently moved her aside to check his pulse, his breathing, his injuries. But even as she stepped back, her eyes never left him. When they lifted him onto the stretcher, she followed almost instinctively, as if her presence was the thread holding him together. One of the medics turned and asked, "Are you family?" Sandra hesitated for a moment, then said softly, "I'm close enough. I'm not leaving him." And something in her voice left no room for doubt. Inside the ambulance, the air smelled of antiseptic and urgency. Machines beeped, voices shouted medical terms, and the road outside blurred as the vehicle sped forward. Sandra sat near his side, holding his hand still, whispering to him that everything would be all right. Deep inside, though, her own fears screamed louder than any siren. She thought of how quickly life could change, how a single moment could shatter the calm of an entire day. But she also felt the weight of resilience pressing in, reminding her that broken moments often revealed the deepest strength. She didn't know what the next hours would bring, but she knew one truth. She would not let him face this alone. As the city lights flashed by, Sandra leaned closer once more, whispering words she needed him to hear. Words that carried not just comfort, but a promise. "You're stronger than this. Hold on. I'm right here, and I won't let go." In that ambulance, surrounded by noise, chaos, and the fragile line between hope and despair, a bond of respect and kindness became unshakable. It was not just about saving a life. It was about reminding him, and everyone who would hear this story, that in the darkest moments, humanity shines brightest when we choose not to look away, but to step forward. And this was only the beginning of a journey that would test not only the body but the heart, a journey of humility, resilience, and the power of kindness that refuses to break. The ambulance raced through the streets, its siren cutting through the night. Inside, Sandra's hand never left Keanu's. She sat still, but her heart was restless, every bump in the road feeling like a wound in her own chest. His eyes opened for brief seconds, then closed again, drifting in and out of consciousness. Each time his lids fluttered, Sandra leaned closer, whispering his name as if the sound of her voice alone could anchor him to the world. But there was a fear inside her that she had never known before. The fear of losing someone not just important, but someone who carried with him a quiet grace that had touched so many lives. Sandra thought of the countless times she had seen him smile at strangers, the way he listened without judgment, the humility that made him loved not for fame but for heart. And now that same heart lay fighting beneath layers of pain, and she felt helpless. The ambulance stopped suddenly at the hospital entrance. Doors flew open, lights blazed, and hands rushed to pull the stretcher out. Sandra followed without hesitation, her breath heavy, her mind screaming for strength. Through the sterile corridors, doctors shouted instructions. Nurses moved quickly, and machines beeped with urgency. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, sharp and unforgiving. "Please wait outside," a nurse said gently, blocking her path into the emergency room. Sandra froze, her lips parting to argue, but her voice failed her. She looked past the nurse at Keanu's pale face, at his body being surrounded by medical staff, and she felt her chest tighten. Reluctantly, she stepped back, but her eyes stayed locked on him until the doors shut in front of her. The hallway outside was wide yet suffocating. People passed by, other families, other stories of pain. But Sandra stood still, her back against the cold wall, her arms crossed tightly as if to hold herself together. Her mind wandered to moments of the past, when life was easier, when laughter filled their conversations, when there was no fear of losing what mattered most. She remembered their film sets together, the quiet talks between scenes, the bond that had always been there, unspoken but real. Minutes felt like hours. Every sound from behind the closed doors made her jump. She prayed silently, her lips moving without sound, asking for just one chance, one miracle to see him walk again, to hear his voice steady and strong. Suddenly, the doors opened, and a doctor stepped out. His face was calm but serious. Sandra rushed to him, her voice cracking. "Is he all right?" "Please tell me he's all right." The doctor sighed. "He's stable for now. Multiple injuries, but nothing that we can't treat. He's lucky, very lucky. Another inch, and it could have been worse." Her knees almost gave out. Relief washed over her, but so did a wave of fear. The words, "for now," echoed in her mind. She nodded slowly, whispering a shaky, "Thank you." When they finally allowed her to see him, the sight broke her heart all over again. He lay connected to tubes and wires, his chest rising and falling slowly. His face carried both strength and fragility. Sandra walked to his side, pulled a chair close, and took his hand once more. She leaned forward, speaking softly. "You scared me, you know. You always walk so quietly, as if nothing could ever touch you. But life is never that simple. Still, you're not alone in this." "Not now, not ever." His eyes opened slightly. Though weak, there was a flicker of recognition. His lips curved just a little, the ghost of a smile. It was enough to make Sandra's tears fall freely, though she tried to keep her voice steady. The night grew deeper, the hospital quieter. Sandra stayed by his side, refusing to leave even when a nurse suggested she rest. Every hour that passed, she whispered stories to him, memories of old times, funny moments, words of comfort, anything that would keep his mind tied to hope. Yet beneath the calm, conflict brewed. Sandra felt anger at the driver who had caused this, frustration at the fragility of life, and guilt that she couldn't have stopped it. But she also felt something stronger rising inside, determination. She knew Keanu would fight, but she also knew he needed her fight alongside him. As dawn began to break, soft light entered the room. Keanu's breathing was steadier, though his body was still weak. Sandra watched him carefully, her own body exhausted but her spirit awake. In that quiet morning moment, she realized something important. This accident was not just an event. It was a turning point. Life had chosen this path for a reason. Maybe it was to test resilience. Maybe it was to remind them of the bonds they often took for granted. Maybe it was to teach them that kindness and presence are the most powerful medicines of all. She squeezed his hand gently, whispering, "You are stronger than you know, and even if the road ahead is hard, I'll walk it with you. Every step." Her voice cracked, but her promise was real. She didn't notice that in his fragile state, a single tear escaped his closed eye, rolling slowly across his cheek. That moment held more weight than any words. It was the silent exchange of trust, the unspoken agreement that no matter how broken the body may be, the spirit could still rise. Outside, the city began another ordinary day, unaware of the extraordinary story unfolding in a quiet hospital room. A story of pain, but also of kindness, humility, and the resilience that would soon inspire more than just two hearts. And this was only the second step in a journey that would grow deeper, with more trials, more unexpected turns, and more moments where the choice to stand by each other would matter more than anything else. The morning sun was rising higher, spilling soft golden light into the hospital room. Outside, life moved forward with its usual noise. Cars rushing, people hurrying, but inside, time felt different. Sandra sat still, her eyes fixed on Keanu, watching each breath as though it were a fragile treasure. She hadn't slept, not even for a moment. Fatigue pulled at her body, but her spirit refused to give in. She knew that the fight was just beginning. When Keanu stirred slightly, opening his eyes halfway, Sandra leaned in close. She whispered his name, gentle yet firm, reminding him of where he was. His lips parted, and though his voice was weak, there was a spark of recognition. "You stayed," he murmured. Her heart ached. "Of course I stayed. Where else would I be? You're not alone in this." Her hand tightened around his, and though his fingers could barely respond, she felt his faint grip. The nurse entered quietly, checking the monitors and adjusting the drip. Sandra watched silently, her eyes filled with both gratitude and anxiety. Every beep of the machine reminded her how fragile he was. Yet with each beep, she also heard a rhythm of resilience, as if his heart was whispering to her. "Not yet. I am still here." When the nurse left, Sandra spoke again, her voice low but steady. "Do you remember the cafe yesterday? You told me that small things matter more than anything else. You were right. Even this moment, your breath, your heartbeat, it's more powerful than anything else in the world." Keanu's gaze lingered on her face, and though his body was weak, his eyes carried a depth that shook her. In them she saw gratitude, pain, and something unspoken. Trust. But the calm did not last long. A sudden alarm from the monitor shattered the silence. The line spiked irregularly, and Keanu's breathing grew shallow. Sandra's heart raced as nurses and doctors rushed in again. "Please step back," one of them ordered, but Sandra couldn't move. Her body refused to leave his side. It took a gentle hand on her shoulder to guide her back, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched them fight for him. "Stay with him, please," she whispered under her breath, though no one could hear her. After tense moments that felt like hours, the monitor steadied again. The doctor exhaled deeply, wiping his brow. "He's fighting hard," he said, his tone softer now. "But the next few days will be critical." Sandra nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she whispered, though her voice was still shaking. When the staff left, silence filled the room once more. Sandra pulled her chair closer, sitting at his side again. She took his hand gently, her voice trembling but full of determination. "You scared me again. But you came back. That means something. It means you still have more to do, more to give. You can't stop now." As the hours passed, Sandra thought deeply about the fragility of life. She realized how easily people forget to value the moments they are given. One accident, 1 second, and everything could change forever. Yet in that same second, kindness could rise, love could deepen, and resilience could show its face. Later that evening, as the sky turned dark once more, an unexpected visitor arrived. A young boy with a notebook in his hand stood nervously at the door. His mother, weak and tired, leaned against the frame. The nurse explained softly that the boy had been waiting all day. He had heard Keanu was here and he had something important to give. Sandra hesitated, then nodded gently. "Let them in." The boy stepped inside slowly, his small eyes wide with both fear and hope. He walked to the bed, clutching the notebook tightly. I wanted to say thank you," he whispered. Sandra looked at him curiously. "Thank you? For what?" The boy's lips trembled. "Last year he visited our shelter. No cameras, no press, just him. He sat with me and drew in this notebook when I was too scared to talk. He told me to never give up. I never forgot. When I heard he was hurt, I wanted to come. I wanted to give this back to him. It's the only way I can say thank you." He placed the notebook gently on the table beside the bed. Sandra's eyes filled with tears as she opened it. Inside were sketches. Simple, innocent drawings of hope, of dreams, of strength. Each page carried words of encouragement written in a child's shaky hand. She looked at Keanu, whose eyes were half open, and whispered, "You see? Even now, even here, your kindness still echoes. You've touched lives you don't even remember, and those lives are here for you." The boy's mother stepped forward, her voice soft but emotional. "We pray he recovers. People like him are rare. The world needs him." Sandra nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes, it does. And he will. We won't let him go." When they left, Sandra sat in silence, staring at the notebook. The weight of it pressed on her heart. Not as a burden, but as a reminder. Keanu's life was not just his own. It belonged to the countless people he had lifted quietly, humbly, without ever asking for recognition. She touched his hand again, whispering, "Do you hear that? You are not allowed to give up. Too many people carry your kindness inside them. You've planted seeds everywhere, and they need you to keep shining. So you fight, and I'll fight with you." Her words hung in the air, not just a promise, but a vow. She didn't know what the next day would bring, but she knew this. The battle was far from over. The path ahead would test every ounce of strength, every layer of resilience, every depth of humility. And yet, even in the storm, there was light, a light born not from fame or power, but from simple acts of kindness that connected one heart to another. Sandra leaned closer, pressing her forehead gently to his hand, and whispered, "We are not done. Not yet." Outside, the night deepened, but inside the room, hope refused to leave. It lingered in every heartbeat, every breath, every promise spoken in the quiet. The night stretched long and heavy in the hospital, yet Sandra refused to leave. The steady hum of machines filled the silence, each beep echoing like a fragile reminder of life. She sat close, her hand resting lightly on Keanu's arm, her eyes fixed on him as though her focus alone could guard him from harm. But inside, she carried a storm, fear, hope, exhaustion, and an unyielding determination that he would not face this fight alone. Sometime past midnight, when the hallway lights dimmed and the hospital grew quieter, Keanu stirred again. His lips parted, and though his voice was no more than a whisper, Sandra leaned close, catching the faint words. Why did you stay?" Her throat tightened, but she answered softly, "Because leaving was never an option. You've been there for so many people without asking for anything in return. It's my turn now. You don't have to carry this alone." His eyelids trembled, and though he was too weak to speak again, a faint tear slid from the corner of his eye. Sandra brushed it away gently, whispering, "You've carried the world with kindness. Let someone carry you now." Just as the room grew still again, a knock at the door startled her. A doctor entered, holding a folder. His expression was calm, but his tone was serious. "There's something you need to know," he said. Sandra stood quickly, her heart racing. "Tell me." The doctor explained that while Keanu was stable, his injuries were complicated. A fracture near his spine could affect his recovery. Surgery might be necessary, but it carried risks. If we delay, complications could grow, he said. But if we rush, we risk damaging what's fragile. Sandra's chest tightened. She looked at Keanu, then back at the doctor. "What do you think he would want?" she asked softly. The doctor hesitated. "He would want to fight. But we need to be prepared for every possibility." When the doctor left, Sandra sat back down, her mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. How much pain could he endure? How much strength did he have left? But then she remembered the boy with the notebook, the mother's words, and all the faces who carried his kindness within them. She whispered to herself, "He's not just fighting for himself, he's fighting for all of them." As the hours passed, Sandra found herself thinking about the fragility of choices. Life could be taken in a second, yet hope could be built in the same second too. She realized that resilience was not just about surviving, it was about choosing to rise, even when everything tried to pull you down. At dawn, as sunlight spilled softly into the room, another visitor arrived. It was a quiet man with gray hair, carrying a worn guitar case. Sandra recognized him as a musician. Keanu had once helped anonymously, paying his hospital bills years ago when no one else stepped forward. The man bowed his head respectfully, then spoke softly. "I heard what happened. I came to play for him. He once told me music could heal more than medicine." Sandra hesitated, then nodded, her heart moved by the gesture. The man sat near the bed, opened the case, and began to strum gently. The notes filled the room, soft and steady, weaving comfort into the air. Sandra noticed how even the machines seemed quieter, as if listening. Keanu's face relaxed slightly, his breathing deeper, as though the melody carried him to a calmer place. With tears in her eyes, Sandra whispered, "Do you see? Even now people come for you. Because you gave, because you cared, because you never turned away." The man finished the song and stood. "He gave me back my life when I had nothing. Now I give him what little I can, my prayers, my music, my heart." When he left, silence returned, but the echo of the music lingered. Sandra leaned closer to Keanu, whispering, "You're not alone, and you never will be. The kindness you've given is coming back to you." But the peace was soon interrupted. A nurse rushed in, her voice urgent. "We need to prepare him for tests. Possible surgery today." Sandra's chest tightened again, fear clawing at her insides. She moved aside as they wheeled his bed out, her legs trembling but her resolve firm. She followed down the hallway, her eyes never leaving him. Every turn of the stretcher, every door that opened and closed, felt like steps deeper into uncertainty. As they reached the surgical wing, a nurse stopped her gently. "You can't go further. You'll have to wait here." Sandra's breath caught. She wanted to scream, to fight, to demand to stay, but instead she nodded slowly. Her eyes locked on Keanu one last time as the doors closed. The waiting room felt endless. People sat around her, families whispering prayers, children holding parents' hands, but Sandra felt like she was in another world. Time stretched painfully, every minute dragging like an hour. Her hands shook, so she clasped them together, whispering quietly, "Please let him come back to us. Please." Then she remembered something Keanu had once told her during a quiet night of filming years ago. "The hardest battles are never on the screen, Sandra. They're in the heart. What we choose in those moments defines us." Those words returned now, heavy but guiding. She realized this was one of those moments. She could let fear crush her, or she could hold faith as tightly as he had held kindness all his life. So she lifted her head, straightened her shoulders, and whispered again, firmer this time, "You will come back. I believe in you." And though the doors remained shut, though the outcome was uncertain, there was a strength in her heart that refused to break. Because sometimes faith itself becomes the hand that pulls someone back from the edge. This was not the end. It was another test, another step in a journey that would demand more courage, more patience, and more resilience than either of them had ever faced before. And as the waiting room clock ticked on, Sandra knew one truth: love, kindness, and unshakable presence could turn even the darkest hour into the beginning of light. The hours in the waiting room crawled by with unbearable slowness. Sandra sat with her hands clasped tightly together, her eyes locked on the surgical doors that had swallowed Keanu minutes, no, hours ago. She tried to steady her breath, but her chest felt heavy, as if every inhale carried a mountain of fear and every exhale released only fragments of hope. The walls around her seemed to close in, the hum of the fluorescent lights above a constant reminder of her loneliness. Every so often, footsteps echoed down the hallway and her head would snap up. only to see nurses passing by carrying trays, papers, or their own quiet burdens. None of them carried the answer she needed. She thought about the first time she had truly understood the depth of Keanu's heart. It wasn't at a glamorous event or on a movie set. It was a simple evening years ago when he had shown up at a friend's hospital bedside without fanfare, staying quietly through the night until morning came. He hadn't gone there for recognition, hadn't told anyone about it. He simply believed no one should suffer alone. And now, Sandra realized, that same belief was what held her in place. She would not leave him, not in this hour, not in any. Suddenly the doors opened and a doctor stepped out. Sandra shot to her feet, her stomach twisting. But the doctor didn't look at her. He walked past, speaking softly to another nurse. Her knees weakened, and she sank back into the chair, her heart pounding harder. Her thoughts drifted again, this time to the young boy who had brought the notebook. She pictured his small, trembling hands, the way his mother's eyes had carried both gratitude and sorrow. She remembered the musician with the guitar, his gray hair, his trembling voice as he strummed healing notes in that quiet room. And she thought, this was the ripple of Keanu's kindness. People kept arriving, uninvited, yet connected, each carrying a piece of him inside their hearts. It struck her then. Perhaps this was the truest measure of a life. Not the roles played, not the fame earned, but the silent marks left on other souls. And if he didn't return from this surgery, the world would lose not just a man, but a force of compassion too rare to replace. Just as her thoughts turned darker, the surgical doors opened again. This time a nurse approached her. "They are still working," she said softly. "It's complicated, but he's fighting. I thought you should know." Sandra clutched the words tightly as if they were lifelines. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. When the nurse left, Sandra pressed her forehead into her hands, whispering a quiet prayer. "Please let him keep fighting. Please let him come back." As the night deepened, exhaustion pressed heavy on her shoulders. She hadn't slept in nearly 2 days, yet her mind refused to rest. Then, unexpectedly, a familiar figure walked into the waiting room. It was an old crew member from one of their earliest films, his eyes lined with age, his steps slow but steady. "I heard," he said softly. "I had to come." Sandra stood quickly, surprised. "How did you know?" "Word travels fast," he replied with a faint smile. "Besides, people don't forget someone like him. Years ago, when I lost my job and thought I had nothing left, he showed up at my door, gave me groceries, money, and dignity. I never forgot. So when I heard this, I knew I had to be here, even if all I can do is sit and pray." The two of them sat together in silence, the weight of shared memories filling the room. And for the first time in hours, Sandra didn't feel entirely alone. After what felt like an eternity, the surgical doors opened once more. This time, the doctor approached her directly. His face was serious, but there was a softness in his eyes. "The surgery was long," he began, "and difficult. But he made it through." Sandra gasped, her hand covering her mouth. "He's alive?" The doctor nodded. "He's alive. The road ahead will be hard. Recovery will take time, and there will be challenges. But he fought. He chose to fight." Her knees buckled, but she caught herself on the chair, tears flooding her eyes. "Thank you. Thank you," she repeated, the words pouring out like water breaking through a dam. The doctor placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "He's still fragile. He'll need strength around him. Don't let him lose the will to heal." When she finally walked into the recovery room, the sight of him took her breath away. Pale, weak, surrounded by machines, yet alive. Alive. She walked slowly to his side, her hand trembling as she reached for his. His eyes opened just slightly, heavy with fatigue, but they found her. A weak smile touched his lips, and he whispered with effort, "You stayed." Her tears spilled freely now. "I told you I wouldn't let go. I never will." He closed his eyes again, but the faint pressure of his fingers against hers told her he heard, he believed, and he trusted. As the night stretched into dawn, Sandra remained by his side, her heart carrying both relief and a heavy sense of responsibility. She knew the journey was far from over. There would be setbacks, moments of despair, days of pain. But she also knew one thing for certain. He had chosen to fight. And she had chosen to fight with him. And together, they would walk a path not just of survival, but of rediscovering what resilience truly meant. Because sometimes, the deepest inspiration is born not in moments of strength, but in moments when weakness is met with unwavering kindness. The soft morning light spilled gently into the recovery room, painting the walls in a pale golden glow. Keanu lay still, his breathing steady but weak, while Sandra sat close beside him, her hand never leaving his. For the first time since the accident, there was silence without fear, a calmness that carried both relief and fragility. She studied his face, every line, every shadow, realizing how close she had come to losing him. It made every breath of his feel like a gift. Hours passed, and slowly, signs of strength began to show. His eyes opened for longer stretches, his voice carried a little more weight, though still faint. He whispered words to her, simple, short phrases that carried oceans of meaning. "Thank you. Don't leave. We will get through this." Each word cut into her heart, reminding her that resilience was not about how loud you could roar, but how softly you could keep holding on when the world tried to break you. The boy with the notebook returned days later, this time with a smile instead of fear. He placed a new drawing on the table, two hands holding tightly in the middle of a storm. Sandra watched Keanu's weak fingers reach out, touching the paper gently, and for the first time, his eyes filled with tears, not of pain, but of gratitude. More visitors followed. The musician returned, playing softly while nurses paused to listen. The old crew member sat quietly in the corner, whispering prayers, and soon word spread even further. Strangers who had once been touched by Keanu's kindness arrived with flowers, letters, and simple words of thanks. They came not for fame, not for recognition, but to return the humanity he had once shown them. The hospital room, once cold and sterile, began to fill with warmth, as if kindness itself had taken residence there. Sandra watched it all unfold and realized something powerful. This accident had revealed a truth about life. Fame fades, achievements blur, but the kindness you give never disappears. It returns quietly, unexpectedly, and in moments when you need it most. Recovery was slow, filled with pain and setbacks. There were days when Keanu's strength faltered, when the weight of healing felt unbearable. On those days, Sandra would sit close, reminding him gently, "Every breath is progress. Every moment you fight is proof of who you are." He would look at her, exhausted, but her words always lit a spark in his eyes, enough to keep going. One evening, weeks later, he finally asked the question that had been lingering in his heart. "Why did you stay through all of it?" "The pain, the waiting, the fear," Sandra's voice broke as she answered. "Because you stayed for so many others. Because your kindness changed lives in ways you never saw. Because I couldn't bear the thought of the world without you. And because you mattered to me more than you'll ever know." Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy, full of unspoken truths. He reached for her hand, gripping it with more strength than before. "Then let's not waste what we've been given. Let's use it, every moment." In the months that followed, Keanu slowly returned to strength. With each step, each movement, he carried not just his own resilience, but the weight of every soul who had come to remind him why he mattered. He understood now that survival was not just about living. It was about choosing to give more of yourself when life gives you another chance. The accident had broken his body, but it had also awakened something deeper. It had shown him the immeasurable power of humility, the strength of resilience, and the endless reach of kindness. And through it all, Sandra never left his side. She walked with him through the long nights, the painful recoveries, the tears, and the small victories. Together, they discovered that sometimes the greatest stories are not written in success, but in the way two people choose to hold on to each other when the world tries to pull them apart. When he finally walked out of the hospital doors, the sunlight touched his face, and the crowd that had gathered outside erupted in relief. Cameras flashed, voices shouted, but he didn't look at them. He looked only at Sandra, his eyes filled with quiet gratitude. She smiled softly, whispering so only he could hear. You made it. We made it. He nodded, his hand holding hers tightly. And we'll keep making it, one step at a time. And as they walked forward together, the world watching, it was not the accident that defined them, but the kindness, respect, and resilience that carried them through. In the end, the story was not just about survival. It was about how love and humanity shine brightest in the darkest hours, turning broken moments into timeless reminders that we are never truly alone when we choose to stand by one another.